All right, guys. So the alleged Charlie Kirk assassin has now officially been charged in court. So I want to do a couple of different things in this video. I want to give you guys a basic summary rundown of what's in this charging document. Then I also want to get to some reporting from Ken Klippenstein. He actually got his hands on some of the Discord groups and the messages that Tyler was reportedly a part of. And this kind of blows a massive hole in the narrative that we're hearing from a lot of conservatives that Tyler was part of some sort of like radical online trans Antifa supercell that's taking over the country and needs to be clamped down on. So we'll look through some of those messages, and then we're also going to go through conservatives in both the media as well as elected officials themselves, from the Senate to the White House, using Charlie Kirk's assassination as an opportunity for a full-blown crackdown on any and all political dissent. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting off again with this charging document that you can see in its full here from the New York Times. So I want to actually scroll all the way down to the bottom here to start off so we can get just a basic rundown of what the actual counts are that they're bringing against Tyler Robinson. So count number 1 is aggravated murder, which pertains to Robinson's shooting and killing of Charlie Kirk in a manner that exposed others, in addition to Mr. Kirk, to a great risk of death. Count number 2, felony discharge of a firearm, pertains to Robinson's shooting toward Mr. Kirk, knowing that doing so would endanger those in the bullet's path. That shot caused serious bodily injury to Mr. Kirk, ultimately resulting in his death. Count number 3, obstructing justice, pertains to Robinson's removal and hiding of the rifle that he used to shoot Charlie. Count number 4 is obstructing justice, which pertains to Robinson's removal and hiding of the clothing that he wore when he shot Charlie Kirk. Count number 5, witness tampering, pertaining to Robinson's statement to his roommate, telling his roommate to delete their text messages that followed the shooting. Count number 6, witness tampering, pertains to Robinson's statement to his roommate, telling the roommate, if any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and remain silent. And then finally, count number 7, violence offense committed in the presence of a child, is the final thing that they're going on there. And they also have tacked on a bunch of different enhancements that are a part of these charges. Again, you can see all of the charges and the enhancements run through there. Now, they continue on in this. They give the probable cause statement, then they get to the shooting itself, sort of just a basic rundown of what this Turning Points USA event was. You know, it was sort of the first of many stops that Charlie was planning across the country. They point out that it was at UVU. They describe sort of the environment in which it took place, obviously under that canopy inside the middle of the campus. They continue down here, getting into some of the investigations. They have the UVU surveillance investigation. This one describes what the surveillance cameras themselves showed. I showed some of these shots in my previous videos. You can see some of him sort of running along the roof after the shooting took place. There are other ones, obviously the pictures that were released by the feds showing him sort of, limping towards the school with what appeared to be the rifle stuffed down his jeans. There are other shots of him in the stairwell, etc. So this is kind of running through what they got from the surveillance. They also say that a police officer, once he heard that the shot went off, was looking for sniper positions and then eventually made his way up onto the roof and sort of found the spot in the gravel on the roof where Tyler potentially would have shot from. So they break down all of that. They say expanded crime scene investigation. They then track where apparently Tyler ran to after he jumped off of the roof after the shooting took place. He ran into this quote unquote wooded area, and then apparently that's where he allegedly dropped the rifle fully intact in the woods. That, according to this charging document here, it looks like he intended to go back and get himself, and then because of the lockdown that was happening, he wasn't able to go back and to get the rifle from where he dropped it. They reaffirm some of the things that were written on the bullet cartridges. The first one, obviously, again, notices bulge, woo, what's this? The second one, hey fascist, catch, with the arrow symbols from the Helldivers video game as a reference there. You also have, again, the oh bella chow, bella chow, bella chow, chow, chow. And then the final one, if you read this, you are gay. Basically the sort of meme language that he was putting on all of these bullet casings. They, finish off going down here with the Washington County investigation, describing how basically he turned himself in, because remember, guys, it was up until the last moment that the feds basically didn't really know anything about who the shooter was or where he was. And it essentially came down to his parents, both his mother and his father, looking at the pictures that were released and saying, that kind of looks like our son. Let's try to get in contact with him. And they state in this charging document that according to the conversations between Tyler and his parents, parents. Tyler was looking to basically end his own life. The parents were able to convince him not to do that. I guess he went home, and then they figured out a plan and eventually convinced him to turn himself in to the police. Now we get this. Okay, so here's the roommate situation, right? There's been a lot of speculation floating about this sort of roommate that Tyler was living with at the time. So let's get into some of the details on this. They say police interviewed Robinson's roommate, a biological male who was involved in a romantic relationship with Robinson. The roommate told police that the roommate received messages from Robinson about the shooting and provided those messages to the police. So they say on September 10th, 2025, the roommate received a text message from Robinson, which said, "Drop what you are doing, look under my keyboard." The roommate then looked under the keyboard and found a note that stated, quote, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." And they say that police found a photograph of this note. And there was sort of this weird situation yesterday on Fox News with Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, where he was being very vague and confusing in saying, we found a manifesto, but the manifesto was destroyed, but we were, due to forensic evidence, able, and our interrogation methods, able to find out evidence of what that note said. And that was all extremely confusing. And I don't know why he worded it in that way, but it looks like this is the note that they're talking about. So I guess what happened is he allegedly wrote this note saying he had an opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and he was going to take it. He then put that note under his keyboard, I guess for potentially to tell his roommate to go and find it. He then does the shooting, tells his roommate to go and find the note, and then in that period of time, the note was destroyed, but the roommate, I guess, took a photograph of it. Like, is that what we're saying here? I guess that's kind of, how I'm reading into that. Now, we get to this because this is the text exchange back and forth between Tyler Robinson and his roommate. So after reading this note, the roommate responded, "What?" with a bunch of question marks, saying, "You're joking, right?" And then he says, "I am still okay, my love, but am stuck in Orem for a little while longer. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I gotta grab my rifle still. To be honest, I'd hope to keep it a secret until I died of old age. I'm sorry to involve you." So it looks like he was still, at this point, looking like, okay, I'm gonna get away with this, right? I'm gonna go and try to collect my rifle, or at least I had intended to, and I would keep this a secret until I was old. So he thought he was gonna get away with this. The roommate says, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" And he says, "I am. I'm sorry." And then the roommate says, "I thought they caught the person." And he says, "No, they grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering." Now, in terms of this person, the crazy person, just to pause down here for a second, we do have an update on this person. And this was one of the most bizarre aspects of how this all played out, is that as like in the immediate aftermath of Charlie Kirk being shot, there were videos circulating of this guy being arrested by police, right? And so people immediately were like, okay, maybe this is a shooter. And I guess as he was sort of being arrested, he was giving the indication that he was the shooter. And it looks like he basically just lied about that. Now, why would somebody do that, right? If you have no connection to Tyler Robinson, if you're not intentionally trying to cause chaos or make a distraction for Tyler to then be able to get away, right? I have no idea why this man did what he did, but he did it. And now, as he was being charged with obstruction of justice, right, he was also apparently admitting to the FBI that he had child abuse material on his cell phone. And so now he's also being charged with that. So like, this is one of the many very strange, unexplained, unanswered questions revolving this shooting. Is, first off, who is this guy? What is his background? Why would you ever behave in that kind of a way if you weren't involved in the shooting in any way, shape, or form? And then why did you do this as well? I mean, this entire situation is absolutely insane. Maybe it's just a crazy old guy. I don't know. You guys tell me. But so they reference that, right? And he says, that's not the person, right? So then he says, why? Why did I do it? And Robinson says, I had enough of this hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I'm able to grab my rifle scene. I will have left no evidence, going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it. The roommate says, how long have you been planning this? He says, a bit over a week, I believe. I can get close to it, but there's a squad car parked by. I think they already swept that spot, but I don't want to chance it. And then he says, I'm wishing I'd circle back to grab it, meaning the gun, as soon as I got back to my vehicle. I'm worried about what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. I don't even know if it had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about prints I had to leave in a bush where I changed outfits, didn't have the ability or time to bring it with me. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find prints, which it looks like they did, by the way. How the fuck will I explain losing it to my old man? The only thing I left was the rifle wrapped in a towel. So it looks like he's basically admitting to everything in this alleged text exchange, right? And he also says that he's only been planning this for like a week. So I guess the indication here is that, you know, he had beef with Charlie Kirk. He thought that Charlie Kirk was a deeply hateful person, a bad person, and he decided to take the opportunity that he had to go and try to shoot him, right? So it seems like, you know, a week is a week, but relatively spur of the moment sort of decision making here from Tyler Robinson. Again, lots of unanswered questions there, because there's plenty of people who I and many other people think are hateful, who are despicable, who are terrible human beings, but not everybody goes and picks up a rifle and assassinates somebody like that. So again, further unanswered questions that I think need to be explored as a part of this. The final thing down here that's interesting is he says, remember how I was engraving bullets? I guess giving the indication that the roommate knew that he was engraving bullets. He says the fucking messages are mostly a big meme. If I see notices bulge woo on Fox News, I might have a stroke. So again, while everybody is trying to explore what exactly all of the indications on the bullet casings meant, whether it meant he was a groyper, whether it meant he was a, you know, radical left Antifa person or whatever, it looks like it was just sort of a meme to him, right? And it seems like first and foremost, that's kind of what the indication is that he's giving here. He says it was basically just a meme, and, you know, wouldn't it be insane if Fox News is talking about notices bulge woo, right? Then he goes on here, and this is where you sort of get to those final charges of obstruction of justice. He says, delete this text exchange. My dad wants photos of the rifle, etc. He says, since Trump got into office, my dad has been pretty diehard MAGA. He says he's going to turn himself in. He says, don't talk to the media. Don't do any interviews or make any comments. If police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and remain silent. So that's essentially the entire charging document, right, that we have at our disposal. So again, some of the basic information on the timeline was broken down in this. It looks like he basically admitted everything after the fact to his roommate and you know, potential romantic partner. And basically that partner ended up cooperating with the police. The parents helped to turn him in, and now he's being charged. So there's just a basic rundown on all of the information that we have from that charging document. Again, a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of details that are still unclear, and a huge reason for that, I think, is because of the absolute abysmal way that the FBI, that the feds handled the entirety of this investigation, all of the different confusing pieces of information, contradicting pieces of information that we've been getting throughout all of this. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and what sort of defense that Tyler is going to go with, because it is actually entirely possible that because of how they mishandled this investigation, that it could screw up the trial from the perspective of the, you know, the government bringing these charges. So again, we'll have to stay on top of that. Now we move on to this. Ken Klippenstein again got leaked messages from the Charlie Kirk assassin, which he says accused shooters' politics are not what the government and the media are saying. So a couple of different things here. We got a bunch of screenshots that he's going to show from some of these Discord groups that he was a part of. So this looks like the first initial reaction in the chat to Charlie Kirk being shot. They say Charlie got shot. He's dead. I just saw the video. Holy shit. Rest in peace, I guess. Bro didn't deserve to go out like that. Sad. And then here we have a message from Tyler Robinson. His handle is zealousmonkey55095. He says, hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this. I'm surrendering through a sheriff friend in a few moments. Thanks for all the good times and laughs. You've all been so amazing. Thank you for everything. So again, we had some claims early on that like this Discord group that he was a part of, they were planning this and they were all kind of in on it in some way or aware that he was going to do that. It does not look like that's the case in any way, shape, or form. It looks like nobody in this group chat was aware that this was going to happen. They were pretty shocked by it. At least one of them was saying that it was sad and that he didn't deserve to go out like that. And then even in Tyler's response here, it's not as if he's, you know, trying to explain it to people who would agree with this kind of thing, right? It's him explaining, saying, I'm sorry for all of this. I'm going to turn myself in. You guys have been amazing, etc. So a little bit more on this here from Ken. He says Trump and company portray the alleged Utah shooter as left-wing and liberals portray him as right-wing. The federal conclusion will inevitably be that he was a so-called nihilistic violent extremist, or an NVE. Meanwhile, the crackdown has already begun. As I reported yesterday, the country is practically ready to go to war. And again, more on that here in a second. We got a quote here saying from one of his friends, it's been so terrible, and seeing it from an inside perspective is so frustrating. This is somebody who has been friends with Robinson since middle school. The childhood friend who asked not to be named for fear of threats provided the above non-public photo of Robinson on a camping trip, a favorite activity of his to corroborate their relationship. They continue, saying, I think the main thing that's caused so much confusion is that he was always generally apolitical for the most part. Interesting. That's the big thing. He just never really talked about politics, which is why it's so frustrating. So he says the picture that emerges bears little resemblance to the media version. Robinson, I am told, though quiet, was a well-liked person with a supportive family. The friend group, who he interacted with on Discord, far from some kind of militia camp or Antifa bunker it's being portrayed as, represented a range of different political views, but mostly talked about video games. Yesterday, FBI Director Kash Patel said in an interview that Robinson subscribed to left-wing ideology, citing his family's remarks to investigators, but those close to Robinson say that there was a lot that his family didn't know about him, saying, quote, their ideas are based on someone they didn't fully understand, the childhood friend told him. Though the family was generally supportive of Robinson, they didn't seem to know about his relationship with a transgender person named Lance, again, the roommate that we were talking about before. They say Tyler's bisexuality, the friend said, was coupled with openness on LGBT issues, but it wasn't some cookie-cutter lefty position on every or even most issues, his friends say. They say, quote, obviously he's okay with gay and trans people having a right to exist, but also believes in the Second Amendment. The friend described Robinson as a fairly typical young man, his age, from Utah, someone who loved the outdoors, was a gamer, and was into guns. And then you can see further screenshots of them just chatting about gaming-related things. They say private Discord messages shared with me by a friend of Robinson's confirmed that Robinson wasn't some political martyr. A search for posts about both Biden and Trump in these Discord chats turned up just one hit each, and they're both basically just like politically innocuous statements. I mean, one here is referencing the impeachment of Trump, but it's even like pretty politically neutral here, saying, you know, he's going to get booted out if they find that he committed the things that he's accused of. And then on the Biden thing, they're basically just talking about how the election is playing out with no sort of political leaning indicated in either one of those chats, either pro-Biden or pro-Trump, or anti-Biden or anti-Trump. They continue down here saying that despite his verbal reticence, Robinson was not a loner, according to his friends, unlike the typical, stereotypical outcast shooter driven by violence, by social rejection. He was apparently amiable and well-liked. They say, quote, everyone who knew him liked him, and he was always nice, a little quiet and kept to himself, but wasn't a recluse. He continues saying, regardless of the horrible actions that took place, we must take this moment to remember that God is a living and loving God who loves all of his children, referencing this post that was put in the group chat itself in the aftermath of them finding out that Tyler, a member of their group chat, killed Charlie Kirk. So even this last message is like, you know, it's centered on religion. It's, you know, describing it as a horrible action that took place, and, you know, calling for prayer for Charlie and calling for prayer for Tyler as well. So, I mean, listen, guys, all of this, again, is, and then they, you know, go on down here to show just like general random things that they were sharing in the chat of pictures of, you know, New Hampshire spring in southern Utah, and, you know, things that they were working on building, etc. And so, you know, he also points out that nobody in the group chat was cheering or justifying the murder of Charlie Kirk. They're just trying to understand what happened. And so, you know, as people are trying to push this narrative, as we've seen from many conservatives, that, you know, Tyler was part of some broader movement that's happening in the United States of radical trans Antifa murder cells that are sweeping the nation. It doesn't look to be the case at all. I mean, at least from these Discord messages, it seems like he wasn't even the most sort of political person, which makes all of this that much more strange, right? Obviously, the indications are that he lived with a trans romantic partner. And, you know, obviously we saw from the charging document that one of the things that he said was that Charlie Kirk was a very hateful person. And so, you know, sometimes the simplest answer is the answer? I don't know. Again, there's still many unanswered questions as of this point, but it's entirely possible that this is just a guy who very much disliked or hated Charlie Kirk. He saw an opportunity and he took that opportunity. Again, obviously, that's not a normal thing that most people do when you find somebody to be hateful or bigoted or whatever else the case may be. So we're going to need more information as we go on through all of this. But again, the indications here, especially from this reporting from Ken Klippenstein, is that this guy doesn't appear to have been either like a super online far-right neo-Nazi Groyper type, and he also doesn't seem to be like a super far-left radical trans Antifa guy, right? It seems kind of, much more personalized to him as an individual than to some sort of a broader movement or anything like that, which I think leads very well into the final thing that I'm going to talk about in this video, because again, conservatives are going absolutely buck wild using Charlie Kirk's assassination as an opportunity to crack down on their political opponents. So here to start us off, I'm going to play some of these clips. I won't play the other ones because the video will be way too long, but here we have Jesse Waters on Fox News. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this short little clip here.
These people are incapable of turning the temperature down. So it's our responsibility to do it for them, for the safety of the country and for their own safety. Their heinous movement should be politically destroyed, systematically dismantled. Their financial backing should be bankrupted. Their media sponsors defeated in the marketplace. Their candidates beaten at the ballot box. And their acolytes in academia, behind the pulpit, in city councils and corporate America will be spotlighted and given one chance to confess and apologize. And if they don't, thrown out of polite society.
Okay, so a couple of things here. First off, what do we mean by they in this circumstance, right? He says these people are incapable of turning the temperature down, which, number one, is an amazing thing to hear from a Fox News host, a network that purely exists to stir rage and hatred and bigotry in this country. Like, kind of an amazing thing to hear from a Fox News host that it's the left, it's liberals who are incapable of turning the temperature down. But who is these people in this situation, right? He says their heinous movement. Whose heinous movement? Right? Again, we just read through the charging docs. We just read through the Ken Klippenstein piece on the Discord messages. There's no indication that there's anything broader about this than Tyler Robinson himself, right? And by the way, every single Democratic politician that I've seen, almost every single liberal person in the media that I've seen has been condemning the killing of Charlie Kirk. So I'm not exactly sure like what we're even talking about here. That because this guy, Tyler Robinson, allegedly killed Charlie Kirk, whatever his motives may have been, that therefore that justifies, going after academia, going after the pulpit, city councils. I mean, basically everybody saying throw everybody out of polite society, right? Their financial backing should be bankrupted. Whose financial backing are you talking about here? Tyler Robinson's family, his friends? Like, again, they're talking about as if there's some nationwide cabal of Antifa, that it's some like supercell militia that's operating and that it's funded by the Democratic Party and by George Soros or whatever else. Like, what does this even mean? Their financial backing should be bankrupted? Whose? Right? What heinous movement are we talking about here? Not to mention that overwhelmingly, statistically, political violence in this country comes from the right, right? You don't hear when there's a mass shooting directed against, Latino people or directed against, black people or directed against anybody else from the right. You don't hear them saying the same thing. Then it's just, thoughts and prayers, right? There's nothing that we can really do about this. We can't have gun reform. We can't address this in any sort of broader way. We certainly aren't going to tamp down the rhetoric that we have coming from the right. There's never any sort of analysis like that when it's a right-wing mass shooter or a right-wing political murder, right? Think just a couple of months ago, we had the assassination of the Minnesota speaker, the Minnesota lawmaker. And what were they saying about this? I mean, even Charlie Kirk himself, in the aftermath of Paul Pelosi being attacked, said that the guy who attacked him was a patriot who should be bailed out of prison. So, like, come on, let's not pretend as if, this is some broader thing with the left or the liberals that justifies some sort of mass debanking and pushing everybody out from society, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just the first clip there. We continue, again, with just some of the brazen hypocrisy from many of these conservatives. I mean, rewind to December of 2016, we had Matt Walsh here saying, it seems that if you pretend to be a free speech advocate, you should always oppose anyone getting fired over a controversial tweet. Fast forward to today or yesterday, he says, it is good that these people lose their jobs. It is good that they are shamed and humiliated and must live with the repercussions for the rest of their lives. It is good that they wake up every day until they die wishing that they hadn't said what they had said. We cannot have a civilized society. So, I mean, again, this is in response specifically over this mass wave of cancellation that's being pushed by people like Laura Loomer and Libs of TikTok and many other. There's like this new organization that they set up that was originally called Charlie Kirk's Murderers. There's this mass coordinated campaign, both at the lower level, like the Matt Walsh level, and also being coordinated with the White House and with Senate Republicans to get everybody canceled, to make everybody lose their jobs if they weren't sufficiently condemning the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I mean, some of the people who I saw who they were trying to get fired did as little as posting some of the most atrocious quotes from Charlie Kirk during his life. Not justifying his murder, not saying more conservatives should be murdered, nothing like that. Just posting quotes that Charlie Kirk himself said. And these people are trying to push to get people fired for that. Right? Again, complete flip-flop from the so-called free speech crowd, right? More here, because again, it's also in the political realm. We have even Rand Paul, who I thought was supposed to be one of these more libertarian members of Congress. And even he says, people say, oh, you have a right to say things. Well, actually, they don't necessarily have a right to say things. Many people have in their contract, their employment contract, what we call a morals clause. I think it is time for this to be a crackdown on people. So here you have even one of the most so-called libertarian members of Congress who is openly saying we should get people mass fired, right? Using his position as a government official to encourage people to be fired for expressing things that he politically disagrees with, right? I mean, come on, let's not pretend that if you rewind to, let's say, the murder of George Floyd, that if you had Senate Democrats calling for people to be fired for diminishing the death of George Floyd, that there wouldn't be a complete, full-blown hair-on-fire freakout coming from the right. But this is exactly what they're doing. More here. We have Stephen Miller, as he was going on the Charlie Kirk show with J.D. Vance, who sort of took over the show for a day after Charlie was killed. And this is what Stephen Miller says. He says, we are going to channel all of the anger that we have over the organized campaign that led to this assassination to uproot and dismantle these terrorist networks. The organized doxing campaigns, the organized riots, the organized street violence, the organized dehumanization, vilification, posting people's addresses, combining that with messaging designed to trigger and incite violence, and actual organized cells that carry out and facilitate the violence. It is a vast domestic terror movement. He says, with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the DOJ, Homeland Security, and throughout the government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe. And it will happen again. This will happen in Charlie's name. So, I mean, again, what the fuck are we even talking about here, guys? The organized street violence? Then he says, dehumanization and vilification. Well, what does that mean? I mean, could that apply to me if I say Donald Trump and Stephen Miller are fascists, right? That they're evil people. Does that mean that I'm now part of this so-called vilification process? That you're going to use the weight of the Department of Justice to come after somebody like me? I mean, he's talking about uprooting and dismantling terrorist networks. Guys, again, we just read through everything. There is no indication whatsoever. There's not a single lick of evidence that Tyler Robinson was a part of some sort of a network in any way, shape, or form. It looks like the only sort of groups that he ran in were like gaming groups for the most part on Discord. So what are we talking about? Terror networks, right? I mean, again, these organized cells. There's no organized cell that's a part of this. And so what is the implication of what he actually means by that? Well, he means he's just going to do a full sweeping crackdown of leftists and liberals across the country, right? Both in terms of going after politicians, going after, NGOs and other independent groups and advocacy organizations. That's what he's talking about here. He's talking about using the death of Charlie Kirk, literally saying it's doing it in his name to do a full-blown crackdown on political dissent, right? And we know that because, again, organized terror networks, this isn't a thing that exists. Not to mention not a thing that relates, as far as we know, to anything having to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination. So when he says that, he's clearly indicating something else. Now, we also have, again, here, J.D. Vance himself from the same broadcast. He says, when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them, and hell, call their employer. I mean, again, imagine if you had Kamala Harris doing an address to the nation, calling on people calling on liberals to call the employers of conservatives who they politically disagree with and getting them fired. Think about the freakout that would happen in response to that. But again, when it's in the reverse, suddenly they don't give a shit. Now we have Pam Bondi, again, head of the Department of Justice. She says, if you want to go and print posters talking about this specific incident that happened with Charlie's picture for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. We have a right now. Our civil rights unit is looking at that. So she's talking about the fact that at one like Office Depot or whatever, some employee didn't want to print out a picture for Charlie Kirk's vigil. Now, this is amazing because we have been hearing for years and years and years now from conservatives that every single private business, right, should have whatever right to refuse whatever service they want to whoever they want for whatever reason, right? They made the argument that, you know, a baker shouldn't have to bake a cake for a gay couple, for example. So that's fine. But if somebody doesn't want to print out a poster of Charlie Kirk, now it's a problem, and we're going to bring the civil rights unit of the federal government down on your neck and prosecute you for that. I mean, again, the flip-flopping is just amazing. Now we have people like Pam Bondi talking about prosecuting hate speech, guys. I mean, I'm not even kidding. It's like, it's almost a parody of itself. She says, there's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society. We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech. So now suddenly conservatives believe in hate speech as a concept. And not only that, but they want to target people for it, quote unquote, target people for hate speech. Again, what does that even mean in this circumstance? Right? Does it mean somebody glorifying violence? Does it mean somebody inciting violence? Because inciting violence is already a crime. Right? So does it mean glorifying it? Does it mean downplaying Charlie Kirk's assassination? Does it mean something else entirely? Again, if I call Donald Trump a fascist, is that now political hate speech? I mean, what are we even talking about here? Now, we also have, again, as a reminder, what Charlie Kirk himself said when he was still alive. This is back from last year, 2024. He said, hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of that is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. So Pam Bondi, maybe, I guess, take a note from Charlie Kirk on this one, who again said hate speech does not exist in America. Now the complete flip-flop is happening. We had Donald Trump who was asked about this. The reporter said, what do you make of Pam Bondi saying she's going after hate speech? A lot of allies say that hate speech is free speech. And Trump said, probably go after people like you. Talking to the reporter here. You treat me unfairly. You have hate in your heart. ABC paid me $16 million for a form of hate speech. That's not even true, by the way. It was a defamation lawsuit. He says, your company paid me $16 million for a form of hate speech. Maybe they'll go after you. So Trump is asked about Pam Bondi, who, by the way, is now apparently trying to walk back some of what she said about hate speech. But Trump was asked about that, and he basically threatens the reporter and completely confuses what the meaning of hate speech is even hypothetically supposed to be, right? Apparently Donald Trump's definition of hate speech here is, if you're mean to me, that's hate speech. If I personally, Donald Trump, determine that you have hate in your heart, or if you're asking me mean questions or whatever, then the federal government is going to go after you. That's what there's no other way to read into this. He says, we'll probably go after people like you, talking to a journalist. So this is where we're at in our spiral to fascism in this country now. Again, weaponizing this as an opportunity to crack down on political opponents. And he's already, acting on this further than what he already has in terms of going after media organizations in this country, trying to get them to fall in line and to be nicer to him, I guess. So here's the latest on that. Trump files a $15 billion defamation suit against the New York Times and Penguin Random House. And then finally, last thing here, we had Mike Johnson also commenting on this, saying leaders cannot call their political opponents enemies of the state because they disagree with their policy priorities. This is something we should have learned in grade school. So, this is amazing for a couple of different reasons. Number one, because I literally have not seen a single elected Democratic official call their political enemies or call their political opponents enemies of the state. The only person that I've ever heard that from is Donald Trump himself. So obviously videos like this have been floating around. This is a 6-minute compilation. I don't even need to play it for you guys, but you can come up with a 6-minute compilation of Donald Trump referring to his political opponents as the enemy within or enemies of the country. So, all of this is just amazing. The brazen hypocrisy of all of this, the brazen complete 180 flip-flopping on any sort of purported values of free speech that conservatives pretended to stand for. Weaponizing this as a moment, even though it has nothing to do with any sort of broader Antifa terror cells or whatever else Stephen Miller and Jesse Waters are talking about. Weaponizing this as a moment to go after political opponents. I mean, this is going to be, this is going to be a messy couple of weeks here because they are leaning heavily into this.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying